folks, the one thing that I could tell you is good about this morning when it comes to conference realignment is that music. That music is fantastic. That's fire right there. But I'm happy to be here with you. This is Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on a Saturday because I was impatient. You know that we're Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both /WakeUpCallDT, and on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com for live internet streaming radio. But I couldn't wait until Monday. We'll be back at our normally scheduled broadcast this week, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. But everything that went down yesterday, I could not wait to talk today. There's a reason why, and people that know me and kind of know like a little bit of the backstory, every show I'm very purposeful with the shirts I pick. And today, as you can see, I've picked my Doctor Strange shirt because it is a very strange, confusing, and crazy, chaotic conference realignment. So you can see the Doctor Strange shirt actually has a bunch of strange psychedelic pieces to it, and we're going to discuss how conference realignment may be crazier than what we've seen in the multiverse of madness. Here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, so happy to be here with you. I have two awesome guests coming up today. Inside of MonPazPopcorn.com's What's Poppin', Ross Turetsky is going to join me, the arson to my Coke, and in our inside joke of arson and coke that we've brought to life here on the show. Ross will be joining me for the first portion of this broadcast to speak on Collegiate Athletic Conference Realignment, and then for the second portion, Alex Dodd will be joining me. Ross joins me as a sports writer of the Times Leader, as well as a sports reporter and journalist in all different ways. So definitely thank Ross for all the work that he does with high school athletics, as well as what he has upcoming here, as he will be coaching baseball for Lackawanna County Community College and Luzerne County Community Colleges. I'm sorry. So very excited about that for Ross to be doing that here very, very soon. As if we could add anything else to his long resume of awesomeness that he's done in the sports world. And of course, we have the sports editor is going to be joining me, Alex Dodd, in the second portion of today's show. Alex coming from the Rapid City Journal as their sports editor. So Ross, besides my fumble of the name of the school, my apologies. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you back on the show.
Hey. You got me up on a Saturday, but I love it. So much stuff going on, Jeremy.
Yeah, we're up.
How dare you wake me up on a Saturday?
So we're up.
He can't go through a trade deadline like we had baseball without making a mess up. And he had, of course, Arson Judge, when he's on pitcher, has actually finally announced his retirement. He's been in and out with injuries the last few years, but let's pour one out for Coke Campbell / Cole Hamels, the great Philly pitcher who's going to be a Philly Hall of Famer, won a World Series MVP in 2008 when I graduated college 15 years ago. He has officially announced his retirement from baseball. So we love you, Coke Campbells, but we'll keep your memory going on with Arsenic Coke each time we do the show. So we'll give a shout out to that. But yes, how did all this crazy madness happen all at once?
Yeah.
We knew about, like, a while back, they mentioned about UCLA and USC, which I was telling you off air, like, those are such known West Coast schools. Like, that screams at you, a Pac-12 school. It used to be Pac-10 back in the day, but Pac-12 school. How the heck? Now, all these other schools, out of the blue, right before, as you said, they had a lot of the press conferences with the media members, and you were at a lot of them last week. And then it seems like right after, they thought they could fly under the radar after all the media people left. They dropped these bombs on us left and right. I'm like, what the heck is going on? These schools, a lot of them are only given 1 year's notice. They're leaving. It's like, a job you don't even give 2 weeks notice. They're like, I'm out of here. Right now, it seems like everyone's jumping ship. We don't know if even the big bad SEC conference, like some of their powerhouses schools, as we were saying, maybe they're going to want to form their own like super conference with LSU, Georgia, the two-time national champion back-to-back, Alabama with Nick Saban, who now says he wants to coach till he's dead. I'm like, that's okay. That's insane. I mean, you're a great coach, but that's pretty hardcore. But like, are they now going to leave their conference? And then you're like, you were telling me, oh, like maybe this Big Ten, because they used to just mostly beat East Coast schools. Well, just like ACC was mostly Southern schools, and then Syracuse, they went from East Coast to playing schools in Florida, nowhere near them. And like, do we really care about student athletes? If we're expecting them to travel, especially a lot of it, even if it's not football, which is on the weekend, you expect like for a volleyball match or a soccer game that like on a random Tuesday they have to travel cross country from California to like Penn State on the East Coast, like back and forth. It's just madness, and like it's wild to think how they're all jumping ship. The Big 12 has taken a lot of schools, and then how with this game of Monopoly and musical chairs, how is Pac-12 the one left? You said they have 4 teams left after next year. How are they when right now they still have USC for another year? They have Caleb Williams, who's going to probably be the number 1 draft pick in the NFL this upcoming year in April, superstar quarterback. But out of the blue, and they got Lincoln Riley now as the head coach at USC and all that pedigree. And UCLA has Chip Kelly as the head coach, and they're improving. But like after this year, what went from being a pretty good powerhouse Kelly, which most people did always respect because they're considered softer schools where they're scoring 50 points a game. They don't play hardcore defense like they do in the SEC or on or the Big Ten. But how does it go from that to like Big 12 now has stolen their teams, Big 10 now has stolen their teams, and Big 10, which signed this big contract that they're going to have primetime games on NBC, not just Notre Dame on NBC anymore. They're going to have primetime games on NBC and stream on Peacock, start on September 2nd, Penn State versus West Virginia, primetime Saturday night game, which used to just be ABC's territory. Like now they're taking teams for the West Coast. Like it's just crazy how it's all happening at once, right before the season starts, because 3 weeks from today, on August 26th, we have that week 0, whatever they want to call it, with the start of college football, high school football locally, with Friday Night Lights to start up here in PA. And I know that Notre Dame's going to play in Ireland against Navy. We have a few nice matchups. September 2nd starts for everyone. So right before the season starts, all these big bombs are just dropping left and right. And how in the end of this game of musical chairs, of high stakes, all this money, and we supposedly care about student athletes, but now they have to travel across the country and vice versa. How did it leave where now the Pac-12 is the one who's been obliterated and is going to be no more pretty soon? I used to at least like watching the games late at night for a late college football game. Fox always showed the Pac-12 championship around December 1st, around my brother's birthday, around December 2nd. How is it where they're left, where they're gone? They're obliterated. So I don't understand how this has happened. And is there any way to salvage the Pac-12? And as someone who's been around as much as you have with all these different conferences that you have these press conferences for and covered Syracuse left and right, is there any path forward for any version of the Pac-12? Because I don't know if there is. I think Pac-12 might be totally extinct like the dinosaurs come 2024, a year from now.
Yeah, bringing up a point here, like you said, I mean, I honestly believe that, I thought the Pac-12 was in trouble months ago. And, I was on record of saying that. And I was also on record a year ago of making the statement that if the Pac-12 wanted to continue to exist, that I thought what they should do is they should bond with the Mountain West, and that would have given them immediate, opportunities to have rivalries within state and things to make sense. Colorado and Colorado State, and obviously you have Utah, and then you bring in Boise, Idaho, which isn't too far away. So and you have Utah State. So I think, it wouldn't have been as grandiose as some of these moves that the Big 12 has made and the Big 10 has made and the SEC has made, but it would geographically make sense. It would have made them the first conference to 20 schools, and so they would have actually beaten out the rat race of the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC, but they decided not to do that. And now that there's 4 schools remaining in the pack at this moment that we're talking, could change in seconds, but in this moment, as we sit here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, we're currently in a place where there's only 4 teams left in the pack, and that being California, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State. And now there's people calling for, hey, you know what? They should bond with the Mountain West, and they should do this, and saying, you're right. I was saying,
the other thing I want to ask you, buddy, is
yeah,
I found it very suspicious. I always thought they should just remain in the Big 12 anyway, the conference. How does Colorado, who's now wants to become a powerhouse now that they got primetime Deion Sanders, the NFL Hall of Famer, be their head coach, and he has so much notoriety, excitement, and media attention on him? They've been in the Pac-12 recently, and it's like almost like they were tipped off or knew something was happening, because they seem to be the first domino when they jumped ship. That was like maybe a week ago or maybe earlier this week. It feels like an eternity ago that they're like, oh, Deion Sanders Colorado schools now going back to the Big 12 next year. And then from there, it went from nothing, and then like 3 days later, everyone's leaving. The sky is falling. So how the heck did that happen? How did Colorado basically jump everyone on that announcement and was leaving? They must have been tipped off at some point.
yeah. I think the thing with Colorado is when you bring in a guy like Deion Sanders, and you ask the question, why would he go to Colorado? What would make him go out there? Maybe, they say these things happen. Oh, they happened in the moment. It was instantaneous. It's kind of like when you date. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like when you date somebody and they're like, oh, yeah, I just started dating someone 3 days after we broke up because it just kind of worked out that way. We weren't talking beforehand or anything. And it's like, yeah, okay. So, I mean, the reality of it all to me is, do I think there's a chance? I mean, and this is my opinion. This isn't me knowing any inside piece of this, but do I think that there's a chance that there was a conversation with Dion saying, hey, if you come and coach this team, just so you know, we plan on making a big move? Because these moves aren't made overnight as much as it feels like they are. The moves aren't made overnight. The conversations of Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten were happening months ago. They were speculated months ago. And, really ever since Oklahoma and Texas are the culprits. When they made the move that they made to leave the Big 12, which they have been like the bell cow of the Big 12, when they made that decision to leave the Big 12, they put themselves in a situation where now going off to the SEC, they left the Big 12 having to figure out what they're going to do. And the question was, who survives, the Big 12 or the Pac 12? And they start, and the Big 12 obviously got advantageous. They, a few years ago, had looked at the American, allegedly, and there was this kind of chaos cloud that was looming over the American summer kickoff when I went to Media Days in Newport, Rhode Island, the last time they were held there. In what was the Big 12 going to do? Were they going to do anything? Because there was talk about UCF. There was talk about, some of these schools out there. And they end up taking Cincinnati. They take Houston and they take UCF. Then they take BYU out of the West Coast Conference where they play their other sports. And independently, they play football. They bring him as a full-time member. They add those 4. So the Big 12, which was actually 10 schools at the time, lost Oklahoma and Texas, became the Big 8 again. Then they added those 4, so they became the Big 12. And that's what really started everything. Oklahoma and Texas going to the SEC to make 16. And then the SEC, after that, the Big 12 having to figure out what they're going to do. They poach from the Pac, they poach from the American, and they take BYU, who's independent, and then from the West Coast Conference. And when those two moves happened, then the American responded by taking 6 teams from the AAC, or from the Conference USA to join the AAC, and that being Rice, UTSA, UAB, North Texas, FAU, and UNC Charlotte. That move just happened officially on July 1st of 2023. And then after that happens, Conference USA has to figure stuff out because they also lost Old Dominion, Southern Mississippi, and Marshall to the Sun Belt within all of this. And so, you look at what each of these conferences is trying to do, and then the Pac-12 amidst all of this is trying to figure out their media rights. And there's a conversation of who's going to go where. USC and UCLA end up jumping ship to the Big Ten. Then shortly after that, they have a conversation about Oregon and Washington, but nothing was set in stone. Then all these months go by, to your point, buddy, speaking here with Ross Turetsky, to your point, why did they wait so long? I think it's because we just had media days. So the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the Pac-12, the ACC, the American, we all have these media days, the MAC, the so on and so forth. So after media days, the media is no longer there. Things have quieted down. Now you make the jump. So now there's no craziness of media days. It's all silent. And this is something that has happened before where there's been a silence through media days.
That seems very shady, and they're trying to control the narrative. I get what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
It just seems very shady to fly under the radar like that. And you were saying off air, like maybe it helped and hurt Pac-12 that they were battling for television rights, and this way, by them not having that set in stone, these schools can leave with no penalty and not have to pay back any TV money. So
well, that's the thing is, like, once you see the schools start to leave and there's no penalty, this is when you go. This is when you jump ship. If you're Oregon, and I was surprised that Oregon and Washington had not made a decision, be it ACC, be it Big Ten, be it whoever. I was surprised that they waited to make this decision. The only thing that makes sense is they do this realignment, and then July 1st comes around, and we know, okay, some of these schools are moving. We know that, some of the American schools and BYU, they're moving on July 1st, 2023. There's the 6 schools moving to the American from Conference USA on July 1st. So there was like, hey, let's let this go past us. 3 weeks from now, we're going to have our media days, or 2 weeks from now, we're going to have our media days. Let's get through media days. Let's focus on this upcoming season, and let's hit when it's silent. Let's hit right before the start of the season. And literally, I mean, camps have begun. That's the crazy thing about this is, these Division 1A FBS football schools, they're in camp right now. They started camp a few days ago. So you're right in the midst of camp, literally having your introductory press conferences, and we find out that Oregon and Washington are following USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. The Big Ten's now going to have 18 schools. They're almost double their name. And the Big 12, this is crazy, and I want people to really let this marinate for a second. The Big 12, when they lost Oklahoma and Texas, they had 10 schools at that time. So they were the Big 12, but they weren't even living up to their namesake. So at the time of the Big 12 losing those schools, they were only the Big 10, ironically, and they became the Big 8. When they added the 4, they became the Big 12, so they actually had 12 for the first time in a long time. And then they add 4 more within the last 48 hours, 24 hours. They add 4 more schools. They bring in Arizona. Well, they bring in Colorado before the last 24 hours, and then within the last 24. So they bring in Colorado from the Pac-12. Then they bring in Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah all together from the Pac-12. So within these last couple weeks, they bring in 4 schools from the Pac-12 after taking 3 schools from the American and 1 independent / West Coast Conference for everything but football, BYU. So think about what the Big 12 has done. They lost their 2 namesake schools. We're going to have 8 teams in their conference, and now they've doubled their conference. They have doubled their conference in less than a year, adding 8 institutions within the last few months. That's insane. So shout out to the Big 12 for that.
Didn't it look like for a while that Pac-12 maybe could survive? It looked for a while that the Big 12 was the one that was going to go.
Yeah, I thought the American was going to go after the Big 12.
Because Big 12 is losing teams, and when you lose your 2 powerhouses, your big rivalry, Texas and Oklahoma, and I don't know how they're going to survive in the SEC because they're going to have to face the big boys all the time in LSU, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee's gone there, Florida. Like, they're going to have some really tough matchups. And I always thought with the Big 12, it was mostly Oklahoma and Texas, and everyone else was just okay. Now they're going to have a lot more competition in the SEC, so they better be careful what they ask for. They'll get a lot of extra money and TV rights and all that stuff in the SEC, but they might have a hard time actually winning championships. I know they have big-time boosters and money, and they can get money to the players with the NAIL deals and all that. That's great, but they're going to have a hard time competing compared to what they did to the Big 12. But the Big 12, which looked like they were going out the door after they lost the big boys, Oklahoma and Texas, somehow have been able to rebound and been very savvy, adding teams, poaching teams, and I don't know why they were able to do that. And the Pac-12, maybe they were in denial that they were falling apart, or we're going to lose these West Coast teams that seemed like they were going to be Pac-12 teams forever. But somehow they were proactive, the Big 12. They survived. And meanwhile, the Pac-12 went the way of the dinosaurs. They didn't act quick enough, and now it looks like they're going to go out the door. And you were saying, last year even, They should just add some of those smaller teams in the Mountain West. And maybe they just stuck their noses up and said, oh, no, they're not worthy of our name. And we're big boys schools, and they're much smaller schools. But, hey, if you added them, you could survive. You could make something. You could salvage this conference. Now that you've waited so long, it might be unsalvageable no matter what. And you're definitely going to probably get a lot less money in TV money now, guaranteed television money after what you've experienced now. Losing those powerhouses, those schools that have been synonymous with your conference for so long, it's definitely going to hurt the brand. You're going to lose money now, because I don't understand how they weren't proactive to foresee this. And I don't know what your thoughts, or are they just simply in denial, or are they that slow to pull the trigger on and starting taking teams from other conferences? Because how did other conferences see it and they did not see it?
Yeah, well, and that's, I mean, where we are right now. I mean, honestly, and you can go and check out my ACC conversation with the commissioner of the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, Jim Phillips, and speaking with Jim about the state of his conference and all of that.
I do want Syracuse to go back to the Big East if we can. I know Big East football doesn't exist anymore, but just for the old school rivalries, I'd love for Syracuse basketball, now under their new coach, to go back to the Big East with all the big rivalries, not have to go play in schools in Florida and all that other stuff in down south in the ACC, and then we can actually have a historic conference championship tournament like they did in the Big East for so long with the 6 overtimes against UConn and all those schools. I would love for Syracuse, at least basketball. I think that would be awesome for Syracuse basketball to go back to the Big East. That's always been my thought. I never liked that they were in the ACC to begin with.
Yeah, no, and they still don't make sense a decade into the ACC. And, I love the ACC, and, obviously I love Syracuse, my hometown. It just doesn't make sense. I think the thing that makes sense for Syracuse would be to go back to the Big East for all sports excluding football, and then to put their football in the American Athletic Conference, where you can be with Navy and you can be with Temple in the Northeast as the American. And here's the thing, and I put this out yesterday, late last night, don't be surprised if the American Athletic Conference, because now I just saw somebody post it last night, finally somebody agrees with me in this world, the American Athletic Conference, to some people as of last night, is now a power conference, something that they fought for, and I think that they earned a while ago. Because if they're not a power conference, why are you taking their schools? Why are you taking their coaches? And why are you taking their student athletes? If this is not a power place, then why are the quote-unquote power conferences poaching coaches, poaching student athletes, and poaching entire institutions from the American Athletic Conference? They've been a power for a very long time. They just had their decade anniversary. And here's the thing, Ross, this is what I'm thinking right now. The American Athletic Conference has representation in the Midwest. They have representation in the South. They have representation up and down the East Coast. The only thing in the Northeast, including in the Southeast, so up and down the East Coast. So you have North representation, East representation, South representation, Midwest representation. The only place that the American isn't right now is the West Coast. And so it stands to reason that they would at least make a phone call to Cal, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State, because the name of this conference is what? American. And if they wanted to have a true stretch across America, the only thing they're missing right now is a West Coast representative. And right now they have as many football institutions as the ACC with 14. They have as many overall institutions as the ACC with 15. So if the American were to go after these schools that are left in the pack right now, they would rival the numbers of the Big Ten, and they'd be right up there with the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the SEC as far as membership if they were to be advantageous and go after these schools, which I think there's a chance that there's at least going to be a phone call, in my opinion.
Get Jerry Maguire on the phone and say, show me the money. You had me at hello, teardrop.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely... So here's my question to you. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think we're done with realignment? What do you think is going to happen for if we got the Ross Turetsky crystal ball? What happens next?
It's so hard to tell. I think we're not done with realignment. I don't know if it's imminent or if it's 5 years from now. I'm still pretty much convinced, even though I don't necessarily think they need to do this. but there's a possibility that schools will start having to pay the players more than just NIL deals. And I could see the big boys in the SEC like LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and a few other ones forming their own super conference out of the SEC. And it would be very interesting to see how that goes. Whereas I don't know if they would be technically under the same banner or if they look at themselves at almost like another version of the NFL and then the other conferences are below them, or how that will work. But I could see a super conference with like 10 schools that think they're the all-time elites and they leave, and then everyone else is then spiraling. The other conferences want to still make their big money and make their big television bucks and fight for all the talent and their notoriety and the attention from the media, that they're all going to pick up the scraps. And then maybe the deal is those other conferences, their goal is then, expanded playoff system in another year from now, that their goal is then to play the big boy conference, whoever comes out of that. Because I can still see that it might be about 10 schools, and I think that would be the next crazy step. But I can see it happening in the near future, that they form their own super conference out of the SEC, and then everyone else is then spiraling to make their own super conference to compete with them. And this was all going to happen under an expanded playoff system where you just hope that it's not just all the big boy conference schools that are in this playoff and they still give a chance for a wild card, smaller conference that a school could survive. Or maybe you won't be able to survive anymore and everyone will have to join a big conference. Even the little guys will have to join a big conference if they have any chance. Even if they went undefeated, like a Central Florida years ago or Boise State, you might have to still jump on board with a big conference, even if you have nothing to do with a Big Ten or a Big 12. Just to save yourselves and have a chance to compete for a championship, especially in football, you might have to do it. So I can see realignment continue to go on, and I still think that super conference is going to be here within 5 years, and the SEC will look even a lot different. They'll still be a big-time conference, but I think the elite of the SEC will have their own, and then the SEC will have a smaller version of good schools, but like the mediocre schools that win 7-8 games, and then the powerhouses that win 10 games and try to compete for championships, they will be in their own super conference within 5 years.
Yeah, so Ross thinking that the SEC could be breaking apart from itself potentially. I said at least 2 years ago that the SEC was going to form its own league and leave everybody. I think that they're going to get to, I said at least a year ago, I think they were going to go to 18 or 20. I still think that they're going to go after Clemson, Florida State, Miami at least. And I think the SEC is going to try to get to 18 where I think they'd be comfortable, if not get to 20. I think the Big Ten made the moves that they made because if you go back and you look, and on our social media, we've shared it, my understanding conference realignment, I put a map up of the United States and went through and circled different parts. And I can't believe this show was a year ago, but it was a year ago that we did this. And I went through what conference realignment looks like and what it could look like and what some suggestions I had were, which included at the time the Pac-12 joining with the Mountain West, which they did not do, and look at where the Pac-12 is at right now. But if you look at the map and you look at the SEC from the southern middle to the southeast, they have that area. You looked at the Big Ten from the Midwest to the northeast and you come across, they had that area. So they were literally two giant circles that were touching each other in like the middle part of the country. And by going and getting USC, UCLA, and now Oregon and Washington, I think what the Big Ten has done and said, hey, SEC, we know you're leaving. We know you're starting your own league. We know that this is where things could be heading. We want to be a part of it. So if we take care of the northern part of the country and you take care of the southern part of the country and we reach out to the west, we're going to have Oregon, Washington, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, LSU, Penn State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and so on and so forth. We're going to have enough products that we can have our own college football playoff and our own championship. And I think that what the Big Ten did, on top of what they had already done, is solidifying my prognostication that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to form their own league, and they're going to leave everybody else in the dust. And the Big 12 is going to try to join that league. That's my thought.
I can see it. Can you just imagine how much money will be at stake and how much money these record TV contracts are going to be negotiated or renegotiated for if there is super conferences, especially a super conference spiraling out of the ACC? What will that go for? Who knows? It might be billions and billions upon billions that we can't even think of. And remember, this is still collegiate athletics. student athletes and players aren't supposed to get paid, and they're only supposed to get NAIL deals, and that's even recent, and that's a free-for-all because you're not sure which boosters and which local companies, what they're willing to pay. And a lot of those big-time money is only going to the big money sports like football and basketball. The smaller sports are not getting the same kind of offers and opportunities. So it's not equal, and it's going to be pretty wild. And I just think we're in the wild, wild west. And I think it's going to continue to spin out of control until something or someone or some agency that might be beyond the NCAA, whether it's the government, whatever it is, has to step in and really find a way to make this a uniform system, college football, that's fair to everyone. Whether that's pay the players a certain amount of money, whether it's capping how much money they can make off their likeness, whether it's how much these schools are able to leave and how easily they can leave with no repercussions or penalties. I don't know. There might be another governing body other than the NCAA that's got to step in. And I have heard from other people who are supposedly experts in the field who think that the NCAA will be obsolete within 5 to 10 years. I don't see that happening, but it could happen.
Which is what I said.
That overtakes it.
Yeah, I said that 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I said within the next 5 to 10 years, the NCAA will either be drastically different than how we remember it, if it exists at all. And we're at the 5-year mark of that conversation that I had made. So we shall see where things go here. There's things that are happening and predictions that are potentially coming true here. So Ross, as always, I appreciate it. We'll continue to follow this and continue to have you on the show to talk about it. And as always, I thank you for your time. And a big time shout out to my niece and nephew, Boy Meets World reference, my niches. So hello to LJ and Lorelai, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you for giving me your Saturday, at least part of your Saturday.
Jimmy! I want extra pay.
Recording in progress.
LJ's laughing about this whole Jamie business, but we're going to a Rail Rider AAA Yankees game tonight. We're going to have some fun. And I'm very excited because I'm about to start coaching Luzerne County Community College baseball, fall baseball coming up.
Recording
in September.
stopped.
So a lot of exciting stuff, and also covering high school football for Times Leader and Penn State Strand Athletics. So very busy with the kids and all the cool things they're doing. Especially Lorelai, our 6-year-old, is first grade to share the airwaves with you and talk with you. And I'll give one last thing. Watch the new Ninja Turtle movie. The kids and I saw it yesterday with the family. We loved it. It's from the mind of Seth Rogen, whether you like him or love him or hate him. Yeah. It's a warped mind, but it's a funny mind. So the new Ninja Turtle movie we thought was pretty good. So have a great weekend, and thanks for having me on. And I can't wait to see what happens next with this insanity of college sports. And I don't know what the next step is, but I know each step of the way you'll be there to cover it. And remember, Arson and Coke. Coke Hamels might be retired, but Arson and Coke will still be on the airwaves for years to come.
Amen to that. Well, as always, buddy, I appreciate it. Have fun at the Rail Riders game today, and God bless to you and the fam. I look forward to talking with you soon.
Take care, buddy.
Jamie! Take care. And so, yeah, you hear that from my nephew as well. So happy to be here on the broadcast on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. We got some bonus time going on here because I was not patient enough to wait until Monday to talk about all this. So I got Dodd on here with me as well. You just heard from Ross Turetsky of the Times Leader in Pennsylvania, as well as a sports broadcaster of many, many years. And now we have here Mr. Alex Dodd, the sports editor of the Rapid City Journal. So with that being said, Mr. Dodd, how we doing? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff for us to get into, and I definitely hope that they've planned accordingly today as this conversation that we have. I mean, there's so many things that are going on, and this has been just nuts. You know, everything that we've had to kind of look at here with realignment and with the way that things have kind of shaped out here. I mean, I don't even know where to start with all of this outside of the fact that it has definitely put us in a place where, you know, we're sitting here today and we're having this conversation about a very different looking scenario for collegiate athletics as we step forward. And it's definitely put us in a place that, you know, I mean, where are we going to go from now? Where's it going to be? And how are we going to adjust to this as a country? So, what are your thoughts coming out of the last 48 hours, Dodd?
um, or whatever they're going to call it now. I mean, is it even going to be able to exist? I mean, who are they going to be able to go grab in order to stay alive? Or the four teams that are remaining in the league just going to go independent? Uh, that's an interesting conversation that a lot of people are having today. But Oregon, Washington, Arizona, and Arizona State acted in what they felt was their best interest. And I mean, really, the Pac-12 should have been more proactive if it wanted to keep those teams. You got to get a TV deal done that's going to get revenue to your schools. But instead, you got Oregon and Washington who are going to take less money than Northwestern to be in the Big Ten, and then Arizona and Arizona State go into the Big 12 as a part of this new look conference. And if you would have told us 2 years ago that the Pac-12 would be the conference that died and the Big 12 stayed alive, I don't think a lot of people would have believed it, because the conversation we were having was, the Pac-12 is going to raid the Big 12,
Yeah.
and instead it's gone the other way around. So it's just a really weird conversation, and we're going to have some weird and different matchups. But college football has kind of always been in a constant state of realignment. I mean, in the early part of the last century, Clemson, Alabama, Auburn, all those schools were playing in the Southern Conference, and that changed. And there was the SIAA. I mean, realignment has always been a part of college football as long as it's been in existence. But it's still it doesn't. It's not going to get any less weird to see these teams play against opponents they traditionally have never matched up with.
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it's really insane to think about where things were, where we, like you said, where we thought that they were going to be, and then where they ended up. It kind of is that, side by side meme of, this is where, we were, and this is how it's this is where it was, and this is how it's going. And I feel that, I really do feel that, because, I was kind of given the backdrop of what we had been seeing over the years. And, what we saw a few years ago during COVID, when Oklahoma and Texas made this move out of the Big 12, I thought the American was going to go after the Big 12. And not that potentially they didn't at least try to have those conversations. I mean, that's something that happens behind closed doors, but you think about it, and that's a real opportunity, I thought, for the American to go after that. And I actually wrote an article about the potential demise of the Big 12 and what could have come of it. I had the Pac 12 taking certain schools. I had the ACC taking West Virginia. I had Maryland returning to the ACC from the Big 10. I had Iowa State joining Iowa in the Big 10. I had the American Athletic going after the Texas schools with their big push to be down in Texas and move their headquarters to Irving, Texas. So I had them going after Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU, who they originally had gone after when it was the Big East, and Mike Oresco was the commissioner there. And then, I had the Pac-12 take a look at the Oklahoma State side of things, and Kansas State. So I had this breakup of the Big 12 that I thought was a real possibility. And then all of a sudden the Pac-12 gets on the chopping block, and the Big 10 says, okay, the SEC took the identifiers of the Big 12 by taking Oklahoma and Texas. We're going to take the identifiers of the Pac-12 in USC and UCLA. And then right after that, there was that conversation, okay, what about Oregon? And Washington was included in that conversation. And then it got quiet. But amidst some of this quiet time that we had, the American Athletic once again had to rebuild. And so they looked to Conference USA. The Sun Belt looked to Conference USA. And between the American and the Sun Belt, 9 schools were taken out of Conference USA. And after that happens, then we see Division II institutions jump to Division I in reclassification, like Lemoyne, which Wake Up Call is the exclusive multimedia marketing partner of, them joining the NEC. So we're seeing Division II schools having to jump up. We're seeing the conversation with some FCS schools, do you want to go FBS? And all of this started with Oklahoma and Texas. They started the dominoes. They started the chips falling. When the SEC takes from the Big 12 takes from the American, they take BYU from the West Coast Conference and from Independent. Then when the Big 10 takes from the Pac-12, the Pac-12 sits. The ACC sits. So what are your thoughts kind of going back and reflecting on the last couple of years of that timeline that it all started with Oklahoma and Texas? So with all due respect to both of those institutions, it's kind of their fault.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what started all of this, madness in this latest round of college football, college athletics in realignment and expansion. I think one thing that's really interesting is that this latest cycle at the end of the summer was all ignited by Colorado.
Yeah.
Going back to the Big 12, and Colorado, they seem like the geniuses in all of this, because when they left the Big 12 to go to the Pac-12 after Texas A&M and Missouri left, it seemed like they were making a proactive move then to avoid some of the ramifications that were going to happen from that move. And now they were right on the forefront of this realignment again to get out of that conference before it completely collapsed. So that's the thing that's most interesting about this latest round, is that it all kind of jumped off with Colorado making a move that, I mean, not a lot of people were talking about imminent expansion. People were talking about expansion and realignment still for things that were bubbling under the surface, particularly like with the ACC. But that move sparked a ton of realignment on the West Coast. And to me, it's still just mind-boggling to wrap my mind around the fact that the Big 12 was, seemingly under the radar 2 years ago, and now they perhaps are the most proactive in all of this. I mean, they've created arguably what will be the best conference in college basketball with the moves that they've been able to make. And they're going to be a really competitive football conference with the moves that they've been able to make as well. So, and they were able to keep it somewhat regional with the moves that they made. It's not going to be a crazy travel burden when everything really shakes out. One thing that's going to be interesting is we're going to see a lot of pod style scheduling that's going to happen in this new college football universe, because that's the only way that it's going to work. And you wonder how the revenue shakes out with the travel budget. I don't think it's going to be as much of a concern as some people maybe think it's going to be, because, unless if the economy falls on hard times, that's one thing you got to keep in mind too. What happens if none of these schools have any money? If their boosters aren't able to give anymore, if we run into a bad economic situation in this country. So that's something that's going to be interesting to see if that plays out. But yeah, there's just so many variables that we could discuss about all of this. And then obviously there's the what's next. With the Big 10 moving to 18, is the SEC going to push to move to 18? Is the Big 12 going to keep moving towards expansion? And then obviously, Florida State was really loud a week ago, and I don't think these moves are going to make them any more quiet. With what they're looking for their institution.
Yeah, here with Alex Dodd on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on a special bonus edition following this conference realignment craziness that has ensued. You said Colorado in this next wave was that first, chip to fall in the latest chapter of conference realignment in collegiate athletics. I can't help but believe that Primetime knew because these things don't happen overnight, Alex. And I was talking about that with Ross a little bit earlier today. It's this. This is not one of those 24-hour things. This is not one of those knee-jerk reactions. There's things that are set in place. I mean, there was rumors about Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten half a year ago. I mean, so
Yeah.
when you look at Colorado, and people said, why would Deion Sanders go to Colorado? I think it's because one of the pitches, and this is just my opinion, this is not me being in the room, but I feel like one of the pitches to Deion was, hey, why don't you come coach our football team? And he goes, Colorado? And they're like, we're going to be going back to the Big 12, and this is our plan. And he's like, Colorado. And so, like, that's what my guy. But I think, I think that there was something about prime time going to the middle of the country to Colorado that just didn't sit with me, that it was just about coaching their football team. And I just had a feeling. So now that this happened, am I surprised? No. And I think the other part of that, like you said, when Colorado makes that move, I made mention of this and I put this out on social media last night. The Big 12 went from could have died, lost our namesakes, to added 4 programs, to added 4 more. They were the Big 10 when they were called the Big 12 because they only had 10 schools with Oklahoma and Texas. Then they became the Big 8 again, even though they were named the Big 12. And as the Big 8, they get back to 12 for the first time in a long time, adding BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston. Then they go and take Colorado, and then shortly after, a stone's throw away, they take Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah. They went from being the Big 8 to being the Big 16. In realignment, the Big 12 doubled the size of their conference. Can we give some kudos to what the Big 12's management did, what these presidents have done, what these ADs have done, and the leader, the commissioner of the Big 12, to sit down and look at what could have been the death of his conference, and it turned into doubling the conference and giving them major names to continue on their history in this new era. I think the Big 12 arguably has done the rabbit out of the hat better than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable what they've been able to do and what Brett Yormark has been able to do as the commissioner of that league. I mean, an aggressive but an intentional strategy. I mean, you keep some traditional rivalry games. I mean, BYU and Utah are in the same athletic conference now. 2 traditional rivals. Arizona and Arizona State are able to stay in the same conference. And obviously the ones they already had, like Kansas and Kansas State. I mean, they've done a great job at keeping regional ties in a new look Big 12 or Big 16 or whatever they're going to call it. Who knows what any of these leagues are going to be called, or if they're just going to keep the same names like they did before, or if they're just going to rename themselves in something entirely. Who knows what's going to happen with all of that. But yeah, they're definitely, if you look at the situation they were in when all of this got rolling, and you look at where they are now, it's hard not to say that they're the biggest winner in all of this, despite not having the biggest television contract that they're going to be able to get out of it. But regardless of the numbers, the job that they were able to do to save their league and to look out for the schools that were left after Oklahoma and Texas got out. I mean, it's just remarkable what they were able to do. And you wonder if they're done. There have been some rumblings that, maybe they would be a league that would potentially go after Clemson and Florida State or, other schools from the ACC if things don't work out over there. That wouldn't surprise me with the way that they've been able to fly under the radar and continue to be aggressive, making positive moves. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some conversations that were happening behind closed doors in that vein. So who knows what the next step is going to be. I know that if there is going to be anything happen to the ACC, there's a limited amount of time before it could take effect in 24. We got about 10 days August 15th.
Yep.
August 15th is the date to circle on your calendar.
Yep.
If nothing happens by then 2024 will look the same. So it's going to be interesting to see. Is it done? Have we settled down, or is there yet another chapter in this latest installment of college football, college athletics, with realignment and expansion?
Yeah, I mean this has been such a crazy thing, and I can't believe I was up late last night, of course, trying to recalculate these conferences and give them new names. But on top of,
I like your new logos.
Thank you.
The new logos you made, just professional, clean cut.
Yeah, I wanted to make it look like somebody just went up and graffitied it. So had some fun with it. So the Big 16, the Big 18, formerly the Big 10, the Big 16, formerly the Big 12, and the Pac 4, while it's still here, because I think that there's a good chance the Pac's going to be gone. I did realize something that Mike Oresco and I talked about for the last decade, and that's that there is no more Power 5. So he wanted to get rid of that moniker, and that moniker is gone because the Pac in no way makes a Power 5. And so that media facilitated name is now ceasing to exist. As we look at where we are right now, I have some thoughts. One of the thoughts that I put up publicly, and that's that the American Athletic Conference, when the Big 12 looked like they were in trouble, I thought the American was going to go after them, like I said. I thought they were going to go after Texas Tech, Baylor, schools like that, TCU. When I look at the American right now, they have placement in the Midwest, the Mid-South, the Southeast, the South in general, up and down the East Coast, in that middle part of the East, in the Northeast. So if you have the Midwest, the Mid-South, the Southeast, the Northeast, and you have schools within that, the only thing you're missing right now is the West Coast between your North, South, East, and West. So I would be somewhat shocked if Mike Oresco and the American Athletic don't at least call Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you got to make the call, right? At this point, especially because nobody knows what this new world looks like. You got to make the call. Why not? What do you have to lose? If they say no, then you're in the same situation we're in before. This is still just interesting to wrap my mind about it. And I kind of want to go on something else that you said earlier. With there being no more Power 5, what does this mean for the college football playoff when it expands? Because originally the Power 5 conferences each got an automatic bid for their champion. Well, now you can't give a bid to the Pac 4, right? I mean, you're not going to just send Oregon State to the college football playoff because they fielded a team. So that's going to have to go away. And these are discussions that have to happen very soon. To get the ball rolling towards next year. I mean, it's not like it's going to you're not going to have to move heaven and earth to make that decision. I think this is going to be pretty easy for everybody. It's not like the Pac-4 is going to carry much weight in that room. But what does that mean? Who gets that automatic bid, or does the automatic bid go away? Are you going to give two to the biggest league? It's going to be interesting to see what it looks like for the college football playoff. And the restructuring of that's right around the corner. There are so many other things that have to be decided as a result of these decisions. And we don't even know if they're done yet. We don't even know if by the time that the college football playoff expands, if the field's going to look like it does right now. So that's the other question is it even going to look like this when we play the college football playoff with 12 teams, or are we going to have to make some more moves?
Well, and that's the thing is I don't think it's done. I don't think it's done because I think the Pac is going to dissolve, and it didn't have to, because my plan a year ago for the Pac-12 was to bond with the Mountain West. and it would have given the Mountain West and the Pac-12 together, it would have made them the first conference to 20. It would have given them geographical rivals. It would have kept that Utah BYU, right pat there, Colorado State. So the schools that have left would have made sense. Boise State, San Diego State. And here's a thing when we talk about San Diego State, and why did they do that weird, like, walk out the door, turn right around, and come back in? I think it's because they thought, and again, this is my opinion, I think San Diego State thought, let's get out of the Mountain West, let's join the Pac-12, this is going to be awesome. And then they got tipped off that the Pac-12 was going to be raided, so they spun right back around. Because think about that. San Diego State left the Mountain West without a plan, and it didn't make any sense why they would leave without a plan. I think they had a plan. I think the plan was, the Pac-12 is going to invite us, and then as they were going around the carousel, they were like, that's not what we thought it was. Keep going. Stay on the horse. Don't get off the horse. Stay on the horse. And put another quarter in, get another token. Come on. So I feel like that's why San Diego State looked the way that it looked. I don't think that was a mistake, and I don't think an institution is that stupid. So I think the tip-off that something was coming was when San Diego State did that about face, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
No, yeah, that's got to be what it was, that they saw the writing on the wall. And they reverse course as quickly as possible. They may be a winner in this scenario too, because they could have put themselves in a horrible situation and be in the Pac-5 right now. So good on San Diego State for seeing, if that is what happened, for seeing the writing on the wall, for realizing that they had almost married a corpse bride and turning around, because that would have been a disaster for their athletic programs to make that move. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you've got to imagine that there were a lot more people on the inside than we think there were.
Oh yeah.
Like Deion Sanders, potentially, like the San Diego State athletic department. You got to think that there were people who, did a little more digging because they knew the right questions to ask, and were able to make decisions accordingly.
Yeah.
And for those people, I imagine that they're feeling all right. And you've got to wonder what the thought process was for these schools that are stuck, what they were thinking and what they're thinking today. Are they in full panic mode, or do they have something lined up already that they're planning to do in the coming days? And I guess we'll find out in the coming days.
Yeah. And I think that something is going to be coming here, because it doesn't make sense for the Pac to continue, and it doesn't make really a lot of sense for the Mountain West anymore, because where's the value that they could have gotten? So, and again, here we are looking at, in the background, staying really eerily quiet, the SEC. And I have said for probably 2 years, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, at least, SEC. People are saying Big Ten now. People are saying today, the Pac should join the Mountain West. I was like, well, I said that a year ago, and right now it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because the Mountain West is going to get 4 schools, and that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to them. And I don't know if it genuinely, I mean, it's going to build the brand a little bit for the Mountain West, but is it drastic? No. I just had a conversation in my commissioner corner where for years now I go around the country and speak with the leaders of conferences, and in my commissioner corner with Dr. John Steinbrecher of the MAC, I said, wow, you got to be pretty darn happy, because you might be the most ironclad conference in FBS right now. I mean, the way that they've just joined and stuck together. We've seen the Sun Belt make moves, Conference USA's made moves, the Americans made moves, the SEC, the Big 12, the Big 10. We've seen a lot of movement going on. But I told you this a few days ago, Dodd, and I'll say it again. The worst action is inaction. That was my quote for the ACC at ACC Kickoff 2022. My quote for the ACC kickoff 2023, the worst action is inaction. The fact that I said it in 2022, I was concerned for the ACC. The fact that I said it 365 days later, concerned would be a light term for how I felt about it. Now, I did speak with the commissioner, and I aired that this morning. My conversation with the commissioner that I had the opportunity to have down in Charlotte, I was going to hold on to it and air it in a couple days, but I can't because Lord only knows what it's going to look like 3 hours from now. So there's a lot of meat to our conversation, and there's different pieces that we talked about. One of the things being, and these are all up in their own pieces on Twitter, so you can follow me at CallDT and check them out there, or whatever it's called now, X that it's called now. But I actually like that it's called X. I think it's sleek, but that's just my opinion. And it's also X is the Roman numeral for 10, and I like Kendrick Lamar, and I love that song, which is X for 10, and he says, "Are you on 10 yet?" So I think that Elon Musk should use that as the backdrop song, get a little MySpace feel to it for a second. But going back to my conversation with the commission, the ACC, when I was speaking with Jim Phillips, I asked him about the conversation between him and the member schools. And he said, we're either talking to one of them or all of them, someone in our staff, every single day. He said the cadence is there, the conversation is there, we are having open dialogue frequently. He also talked to me about expansion. He said we're not going to expand for the sake of expanding, but if it makes sense, we're always looking at it, which is also what he told me last year, and we hadn't seen any expansion. He does understand the revenue issue. And I did bring up when you and I were talking before that Mac Brown of North Carolina answered my question by repeatedly talking about the revenue issue, saying the word money a few times in that response to my question. The other part of my conversation with Jim Phillips is kind of looking at, is he worried? Is the worst action inaction about what we're doing right now? So I implore everybody to go and listen to that conversation. It's on YouTube in its entirety at youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. But with all of that being said, it's a long wind up for me to throw this pitch to you. Where's the ACC right now?
Oh man, that is a loaded question, and I think that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It seems like the ball is in the SEC's court.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ACC situation right now is dependent on, look at Oregon and Washington, for example. They went to the Big Ten, but they had to take a smaller cut of the revenue share in order to make the other schools happy. And I think that that's part of what the SEC is going to have to navigate is, they're going to have to figure out if Disney, if ESPN is going to be able to pony up and pay for them to add 2 more schools in a way that makes sense for all of their institutions. So that's part of it for the SEC. The ACC, man, I agree that the best, you can't be inactive in this, but the ACC is in a situation because of the grant of rights that, John Swofford pushed through that runs to 2036. The ACC is in a situation as a conference where it can't be active. And who are they going to go get at this point that would actually bring more revenue to the table for the schools in the conference to put them on a level playing field with the Big Ten and the SEC, or at least, move the ball down the field, make it closer, close the gap a little bit, because you're not going to be able to get on the same playing field with the pieces that are available on the table. So that's the part of expansion that doesn't make sense for the ACC and why their hands are tied, because they know if they open up that grant of rights, that it would take a number of hours, I think, for somebody to leave, for multiple schools to leave the league if they opened up the grant of rights. So I think they're kind of hiding behind the grant of rights right now.
Yeah.
And the question is, it goes back to what we talked about the other day, is, are these schools that are unhappy with revenue distribution in the conference, in the ACC, are they willing to just leave and say, we'll figure it out in court? We'll find a friendly judge and drag this thing out for 5 years and see if our challenger in the judicial process still exists. And I think that that's kind of the point that we're at. If an invitation was extended today to Florida State, they made it really clear in their board meeting earlier this week that they would be gone. And if Florida State's gone, it's really hard for me not to think that Clemson would be in lockstep with whatever move they made.
Yeah.
And then after that, you got Miami and North Carolina, you got Virginia, you got other schools with really good tradition that will be looking to make other moves too. Like a Pittsburgh, like a Virginia Tech, like a Virginia on the basketball, baseball side. So there are a lot of schools that are unhappy. And there are some schools that, the ACC is their lifeline. They don't, there are schools in the ACC that don't spend as much money on athletic facilities, and they're content with the being third in revenue distribution among major conferences.
Yeah.
And you wonder what's happening for those schools and what those schools are thinking about today. Because imagine that at a place like Boston College, the mindset in the administrative offices is very similar to what it is in the ACC's conference office right now. That they're hoping and praying that grant of rights is as strong as they've said it is, and that these schools that are unhappy will bite the bullet for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, the ACC, as it stands right now, I was not going to be surprised within the last 2 years if Clemson, Florida State, and Miami left. With all the movement in the last couple weeks, I'm not surprised if these teams were. I mean, if anything, it's just expedited it. Florida State's out in public. I believe Virginia Tech's leadership has been out in public. There's conversations that are leaking into the public sector from the school itself, from the board of trustees, from the powers that be, saying we're not okay with this. And again, to not to belabor the point, but Mac Brown to me is a bell cow for the ACC. And when I asked him about the state of the conference at ACC kickoff, that North Carolina head coach looked right at me and said, "We need to do something about the money. We got to figure out the money." And when I spoke with Jim Phillips, he said, "We're well aware of the money." It's a lot of money that these teams are making. And to look at the ACC, this wasn't a bad deal. And to a lot of people, would take the money in a heartbeat. But because the SEC has gotten astronomical, because the Big Ten has gone out of this world as well, and the Big 12 potentially looking to follow suit with that, it looks so strange to say $30 million is chump change or something like that. But we've come to a place where if you're looking at $60 million going to each school in a certain conference, $57 million going to another school, when you look at the ACC and you say, okay, if we split it all right now, it's like $41 million. Well, then there's a $20 million gap between you and these other schools. And the Big Ten, with everything that they're looking to do with their new media rights deal, I mean, what are we really talking about here, Dodd? I mean, yeah, there's discrepancy between the SEC, the Big Ten, and everybody else, but what are we complaining about? You know what I mean? I mean, what is, you want to make more money, but do you have to? I mean, Oklahoma, will they ever get out of the SEC? Will Texas ever get out of the SEC? Will Colorado make any more sense in the Big 12 than they made in the Pac-12 besides geography? Are they going to be relevant on the fields in the courts of life? I mean, for the sake of making money, I understand that the ACC schools arguably want more. But is what you're making bad, or is it bad only because the SEC and the Big Ten are making monopoly money at this point?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but another part of this conversation is if you're a school like Clemson or Florida State that's won national championships in college football in the modern era, and you want to continue to win national championships in the modern era, then you need resources. and that's the part of the conversation is you've got to be able to keep up with Alabama and LSU and Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon. You've got to be able to keep up with these programs financially in order to sustain your athletic department to then compete for national championships. So that is a big part of it. Is if they want to continue their traditions of success. I know Florida State's had a bad decade, but we're not too far removed from Florida State winning a national championship. They made the college football playoff. They didn't have a good experience at that college football playoff that they made in that first year, but they've been there. They know what it tastes like, and it's not cheap to go to the college football playoff, and it's not cheap to build your athletic department to a point where people want to come play there. Yeah. And if you're competing on the recruiting trail like Clemson and Florida State are, with Georgia and with Florida, and you're competing regionally for these recruits, and you have one conference that says hey, you're going to go to the college football playoff every year in this new format, and there's pretty much no question about it. And we've got these facilities that'll run circles around this other school, this Clemson or this Florida State that's looking at you. And with the other thing too is you don't have to fundraise as much for your athletic programs when you make that much from TV money. So that frees up your booster dollars to go to other places like NIL, to where you can compete with those other schools. All of these things are tied together. And this is just one piece of it. The TV revenue is just one piece of the conversation. But it's a piece that really matters in terms of wanting to compete for national championships. If you're an athletic department that's not on the forefront of your mind, or you're fine with winning, the Olympic sports are obviously different. If you're okay with just winning national championships in Olympic sports and being competitive in football and basketball, then maybe this isn't something that you would be interested in. But if you do want to be one of those top teams, then this is an important conversation to have.
Yeah, I mean, here with Alex Dodd, Rapid City Journal sports editor on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, in a bonus episode of the show live for you around the world because of the Collegiate Athletics Conference Realignment craziness. Dodd, a few points before we saddle up for today. You brought up, I mean, like I said, they're all making money, and it's money on top of money, and how is this not enough money? But like you brought up in the conversation of Clemson and Florida State, they can turn and look at the conference and say, you need to listen to us. Because football-wise, Florida State, and I told everybody with Mike Norvell, I spent 4 years with him at Memphis, I said, y'all are going to be fine. And now they're feeling themselves, right? Florida State's feeling good, community's feeling good because they think they got it like that. And they probably will because you got the right guy. And with Florida State getting back up, and I'm not stunned at all that the media picked them second overall, Clemson and Florida State are in a place right now where they can have that conversation with the ACC and say, listen, we are your representation. There may be times where NC State's going to have a good year and Wake Forest, and these are good teams that are consistently good, right? Consistently good. So under Dave Doran and Dave Clawson when we talk about NC State and Wake Forest respectively. So you got coaches that are consistently going to do some good things. You've got Clemson that's going to fight for national championships. You got Florida State pushing to fight for a national championship and get into the college football playoff. With that inside of your conference, and then you look at basketball and you have North Carolina and Duke saying, hey, without us, you don't exist a long time ago. Now the conversation becomes, do they just band together and break the grant of rights? Does the majority just get together and say, listen, we're going to dissolve this? Not meaning that we're all going to leave, but we're going to band together to break this grant of rights to force the conference to have to listen to us. This is how it's got to be. We're going to tell ESPN, no, this is not good enough. This is not what we're doing. Look at what the Big Ten just did. The SEC's freed up ESPN space. The Big Ten's freed up ESPN space. ESPN's fired God knows how many people, so they freed money up somewhere. So there has to be a conversation to go back to the table where I can see the member institutions of the ACC saying, Jim, if you can't get ESPN to change this deal, we're going to break the grant of rights and we're going to force you guys to do it, or else we're going to leave. Because I genuinely, for 2 years, have seen Clemson, Florida State, Miami leaving. Miami, I went through that with the Big East. Miami, if people think Miami has any type of loyalty to the ACC, you're out of your mind. When I look at Florida State, I don't think that they really have to either. And Clemson fully understands that they were part of the Southern Conference, the SoCon back in the day. So they know that they don't have to really. I mean, Clemson holds all the cards when it comes to football. Florida State holds some cards. Duke and North Carolina, Virginia hold the cards when it comes to basketball. And if we're leaning on all of that, and I know a lot of this is driven by college football, but inside of the ACC, something is going to have to change, and it's going to have to change drastically. And the only way that it changes is if ESPN or some taker is forced to expand this. Two things have to, and I understand, and Jim Phillips spoke with me about this, I understand that the ACC is obviously looking at uneven revenue sharing, which is something that makes perfect sense because Clemson should definitely have way more than Syracuse, and I'm saying that coming from Syracuse. I mean, I know the reality of that scenario, but I think where we are right now is the revenue sharing has to be tiered, and there has to be a different makeup of this. Again, it's crazy money on top of crazy money, but if Clemson and Florida State are looking at this football-wise, they're going to turn to the ACC and say, there's no reason for us to be here. There's no reason for us to make this much money when we could be making this much money. And if Clemson goes to wherever Clemson goes, they bring value. Wherever Florida State goes, they bring value. There's schools that are holding on to the ACC. I think NC State can exist elsewhere. If Nebraska can exist in the Big Ten, I think the NC State can exist elsewhere. I think that, Pitt can exist in the Big Ten. I think the schools that need, like you were talking about, that need the ACC, I think those schools, I think Syracuse, I think, Wake Forest, arguably, because they're not a bigger school, right? So I think Wake Forest needs it. I think Syracuse needs it. I think Georgia Tech needs it. I think that Virginia, to a certain way, needs it. I think Virginia Tech might want to flex their muscles, but I don't think they have a lot to argue right now. I think they need it. So what do you think's going to happen here if you had to put your chips down on something? What finally forces the ACC to stop this inaction that they've had for over a year that's been driving me nuts?
I don't know if anything will at this point. I think that the folks at ESPN are content with paying less money to the ACC. I think that there were probably some people in suits that laughed when the ACC signed a deal to run to 2036. I mean, who in the world signs a contract for that long with no growth incentive? It just seems laughable in hindsight to look back at that deal. I don't know if there's anything that the ACC can do. I think that the ACC is just trying to hold all the pieces together. And that's not a good situation to be in. That's what the Pac-12 was in. The only difference between the ACC and the Pac-12 is that the ACC's grant of rights deal has these schools locked into 2036. That's the only difference, is that they just were able to kick the ball farther down the road than the Pac-12. So we'll see what happens. August 15th is the date to have circled on your calendar. Another thing about, Clemson and kind of their ties to the conference. Yes, Clemson is a charter member of the ACC. They were in the room where it happened, but Clemson has always looked out for Clemson in terms of decisions for its athletic department. I think it's going to continue to do so. So we'll see what that looks like by August 15th. We might be having another emergency show in 10 days. Who knows?
So Dodd, as kind of a closing note, what happens first? The ACC's poached. the Pac-12 dies, which one happens first?
I think the Pac-12 is already dead.
Yeah.
It just hadn't been written down. They just hadn't put the epitaph on the tombstone. That's where we are with the Pac-12. I think it's already dead. But the next dominoes to fall are in the ACC. So whether that's going to happen in this cycle or not, to be determined. But it certainly seems like it's a matter of time. I don't know how much longer the status quo can hold. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think, again, the worst action is inaction. I couldn't say it enough last year. And I literally, like a week before going down to Charlotte, I said, am I really going to have to say the same thing a year later? Like, has there really been no movement? And now the ACC is in a place where if the Pac-12 has been pushed out into the Pacific Ocean, and the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC all look good, just because the cannon didn't turn to you yet, what makes you think in these waters that these pirates aren't looking to take somebody else's something? And, I mean, the American, I think they're in pretty good shape. I don't worry about the American right now. I don't necessarily worry about the Sun Belt. I do want to throw this at you as like I said in these closing remarks. UConn, West Virginia, Maryland, Coastal Carolina. I had another one. UConn, Kansas, because of basketball. So Kansas, UConn, West Virginia, Maryland, and Coastal Carolina. ACC schools that should be called. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if the ACC is going to be able to get anybody from the Big 12 at this point. I think that those schools are probably content with the moves that conference has made in the last year. I mean, the other part of it is, it's great to add members for the sake of adding members, but what are those members going to do for you? And I think the Big 12, if they knew a year ago the stuff that they were going to be able to accomplish in the last 3 weeks, that maybe they would have went about their strategy a little bit differently and not added some of the schools that they did. So that's the thing. Expansion is great, but with that expansion, you have to add value in terms of dollars and cents. So I don't know. That's always been kind of the ACC's thing in this since they added Syracuse and Pitt and Louisville. Since the ACC made those moves, it's been who else brings value, and there's only been one school with the potential to actually bring financial value, and the ACC hasn't been able to seal the deal. And they're Jim Phillips essentially said at the football kickoff that it's not a possibility to add Notre Dame. So that's been the white whale for the ACC in a sense. And you wonder if there are any chips left on the table that make sense. In both spellings of the word for the conference. So we'll see. I think it's more likely that the ACC doesn't add any members until they have some leave. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, well, got to do something, right? Playing defense right now and not offense. Playing defense for over a year, the ACC. I just haven't liked this situation for them, and I don't like this situation even more so after these last 48 hours. So we'll see what happens. Check out what Jim Phillips had to say on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt, the ACC commissioner. We will continue to be, I will have my nose to the ground like a bloodhound trying to figure out what's going on with all this. And stayed up late last night, having conversations last night, trying to gauge things last night. So I'm definitely fully into what's been going on. And for the last 2 or 3 years discussing it, certain things I wanted to be right about, certain things I didn't. We're in an area right now where I did not want to be right. So I'm looking to see what could happen on a positive side for the American Athletic Conference, what could hopefully happen for the ACC, because they're in disaster territory right now. And it's kind of like watching a hurricane come into the United States, and they're sitting there in Charlotte going, well, it's not here yet. Well, it's here now. And
Yeah.
and it's kind of ironic because the hurricane is here now when it wasn't here before, like you didn't think it was going to get here. And the Miami Hurricanes might actually go out with this hurricane, which is also unique to this point as well. So we shall see. I got a lot of puns and plays on words coming up for you on Wake Up Call. For Alex Dodd and for Ross Turetsky before, thank you for tuning in. Dodd, as always, I appreciate your time. And if we know anything after today, it's that literally anything can happen within the next 15 minutes. And I look forward to having you on my emergency speed dial.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Always good to join in with you, DT, and the good people up in upstate New York.
Yeah, let the Big West know and everybody up there. At least they look good right now. They're all right. Everybody's safe up there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Be well. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Take care. That coming here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. Folks, to kind of bring this all together and wrap up some thoughts, because there's a lot of things on my mind. And when I speak on college realignment of things that have happened, could happen, things that people never thought would ever be possible of happening, myself included, to kind of wrap up this entire show today, as we look back at it, we're in a place right now where I believe I agree with Dodd. I believe the pack is dead. Now, as I said to Dr. John Steinbrecher, the MAC commissioner, they could have the closest knit group of institutions of any FBS conference right now. And I said that before all this happened, and I say it right now again. The Mountain West looks like they'll be okay. I think the MAC is in the best shape when it comes to staying together. I think the American, and Mike Oresco, the commissioner of the American, has told me over and over again, we expanded to a number that we feel good at, even in the case if there was some more realignment that happened and we were to lose anybody. We've now expanded to, they have 15 schools as members in some way, shape, or form, 14 football members, biggest they've ever been. I think the conference in the most trouble is the ACC. I think the conference that is the tightest is the MAC, like I said. I think the one in the most trouble of what's going to happen next is the ACC. I think the strongest conference is, I think the Big 18, formerly the Big 10. I'm calling it the Big 18. I think they're rivaling the SEC right now, and I think the Big 12, aka Big 16, the Big 10, aka Big 18, and the SEC are in the best shape. I think the one that sustained realignment the best is the MAC. I think the one in the biggest trouble is the ACC. I think the conference to get a lot of respect that deserved it a long time ago in this realignment is going to be the American. I think the Sun Belt will be able to get by here. I think Conference USA obviously has found a way to continue to stay afloat amidst all this. Who would have thought, with all the poaching, that when the Big East died, that the American would be able to go through multiple hits of realignment, Conference USA the same thing, and that the PAC would cease to exist with Conference USA still being alive and the American Athletic Conference rising out of the ashes like a phoenix, three times? So the ACC to me is where the cannons are pointed now. I didn't want this to happen. The worst action is inaction. I've said that for now 2 years. I meant it when I said it the first time. I didn't want to say it again this year, but the ACC has not moved. Now, the grant of rights protects you. And allegedly, we thought nothing could break it. And then we heard that if a majority of schools say we want out, they can break it if there's a majority, if 8 of them say yes. So I think where we are in realignment, I don't think we're done. I think the SEC does not like not being the focus of attention in the country. And so we've seen the Big 12 expand and the Big 10 expand both again. I think the SEC is now going to want to be the headline. And I think the way they become the headline is by going after the ACC, which is what I thought that they would do before. So we shall see, folks, what happens from here. But did you ever believe that the Pac would die? That all the way out on the West Coast, they seemed safe. But the Big 12, which has a big part of the middle part of this country, is now stretched out west. And the Big 10 is now in the West and in the Midwest and in the Northeast and amongst that region. The SEC has remained strong through all of this. So now, and Notre Dame hasn't had to make a move, by the way, folks, and I don't know if they necessarily will. It's all come down to who gets the last four schools of the Pac. Does the Americans stretch out west and truly have all different parts of America in their conference? I don't think the MAC does anything. I don't think the Sun Belt does anything. I don't think Conference USA does anything. And I think the American Athletic has a better shot than the Mountain West. If not them splitting the schools, I would lean on the American to get the rest of the Pac schools. So outside of that, where does the ACC go? The two conferences I've covered more than any other conference in the last decade when it comes to doing interviews and really getting to know the schools on a deeper level, the American and the ACC. And I think both of them are on the clock for different reasons right now. The two conferences I've covered most heavily in a decade are the two conferences that I think could potentially be in the spotlight with the SEC within these next few weeks. We'll find out here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Join us every single Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube.com and Facebook.com worldwide, Facebook.com and YouTube.com/WakeUpCallDT, and on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com. Once we go live, we jump into the archives, and you can check us out on Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, iTunes and Apple Podcasts, MixLR, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, Podbean, Podvine, Player FM, all by searching Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT. A big time shout out to our awesome partners, Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, 317 at Montgomery Street, Great Lakes Honda City, Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, Pizza Man, Chick-fil-A Cicero and Chick-fil-A Clay, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Chick-fil-A Watertown, GG Cards and Breaks, Avicoli's, PB&J's Lunchbox, Mother's Cupboard. A big time thanks to all of our wonderful partners, as well as our exclusive multimedia marketing partnerships with Lemoyne College and the Dolphins, as well as Bryan and Stratton College Bobcats of Syracuse and the Alfred University Saxons. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay close to Wake Up Call, because you never know when another broadcast is going to happen. Here on Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, Twitter at Call DT, Instagram at Wake Up Call _DT. A big time thanks to my guests that joined me for this expanded broadcast week, Ross Turetsky of the Times Leader in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Big time shout out to him for all the work he does as a sports writer and broadcaster, and a future head coach coming up here very soon. And of course, Alex Dodd of the Rapid City Journal, and big thanks to him for being up there in the Dakotas, holding it down, and of course for the work that he's done overall as a sports journalist in his time. Big time thanks to the sports editor of Rapid City Journal, Alex Dodd, for joining me here. So for Ross, for Alex, for myself, Dan Tortora, thank you all for watching and listening. You can go back and watch this instantaneously on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt and on facebook.com/wakeupcalldt. This has been Collegiate Athletic Conference Realignment Craziness, right on the heels of it on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. God bless,